Welcome back to the Communication Mastery podcast with me, Mark Burlinson. In this season in 2026, we're going to spend some time looking back and replaying some of the episodes that some of you have asked about in your comments. And in between those, I'm going to be back with little snippets each week of helpful information that you can put into practice in your business, in your life, to help you grow your communication mastery. Welcome back. This week, I felt to focus in on team leaders or business leaders, managers, the kind of folks who would ask this question of me. And I've heard it many times, and that's what brought it to my attention. People who come to me and say, "What's wrong with my team? What's wrong with my team?" If that's a question that's ever occurred to you, then today's episode is for you. Because the answer is very often misunderstanding. Um, Communication failure in a team, and that's often what brings people to me, of course, because I'm a communication coach. But when people come to me and say, "What's wrong with my team?" what they're really saying is my team is not clicking together. They're not communicating well. There isn't a synergy within the team. There are many obstacles to collaboration. All of those issues that cause frustration for a team leader or for a manager often will boil down to communication failures, relational disconnects, misunderstandings. And it's one of the areas that I really feel compelled to focus on through this year as I help businesses with their communication. How can we tackle the miscommunication epidemic? And so here's a starting point from my perspective, and I hope this will help you if you're resonating with what I'm saying. I see communication failure, whatever shape it may take, it's a systemic issue rather than an interpersonal flaw. When there's communication issues, it's very tempting to look at the individuals who are having the issue and try to fix the individual, when actually what it is that the individuals are doing the best they can with what they've got. I believe that very strongly, that everyone's doing the best they can with the hand they've been dealt. And it's not a personal issue that's causing them to miscommunicate. It's not animus. It's not judgment very often, or it can develop into it, but it doesn't start out that way. Mostly what it is that they don't understand how communication works. They don't understand communication styles. They don't understand how different communication styles have different applications in different settings and for different needs, and that different people who have prominent communication styles within their profile have different things to offer. It's very easy to assume that people who are different from me don't have as much to offer as I do, when actually the opposite is true. If we can look for what each person has to offer and bring that to the table, we all benefit because the full picture is in play. And so differences in communication styles create misunderstandings that are also predictable. Once we can begin to understand, oh, this misunderstanding suggests that these two styles are in conflict, or these areas are being missed, or these questions are not being answered, or these needs are not being met. And once we can begin to understand the science of communication through that lens, we can make a huge difference to what's wrong with your team, and therefore make adapting more possible. Because once I understand communication through that lens, then I can begin to adapt my communication accordingly. Here's what I see again and again. When someone feels misunderstood, then they're either going to intensify their preferred style, or they're going to draw back and not bring their contribution to the table. And both of those mistakes weaken collaboration. Collaboration gets frayed when either of those techniques is applied, whether I'm insisting on things being my way, or I'm holding back and I'm saying, well, they don't deserve what I've got, or they're not interested in what I've got, and I'm going to hold it back to myself. I'm going to withdraw. Both of those mistakes are a problem in any business. So this is what most people get wrong, particularly in the business setting, but it applies across the board as well. They assume that communication is a soft skill rather than a strategic capability. In other words, they think, I'm no good at communication and I can't learn it. Excuse me. Or they believe that others should communicate the way they do. And both of those are mistakes. Both of those are wrong. Um, if I'm treating miscommunication as a personality problem rather than a skills gap, then I'm always going to miss the solution to that problem. The solution is to gain knowledge and to practice, to train myself to be adaptable in communication by understanding communication styles. And then as managers, what we so often mistakenly do is to make reactive fixes, ad hoc fixes for the issues that have come up, rather than addressing the root causes. And like I said, mostly it's an issue of misunderstanding. It's they don't understand these differences. And if it's an issue of misunderstanding, then teaching, learning, coaching can make a huge difference to our miscommunication. There are some patterns that I notice very often when I'm invited into a business to help them. There's the most obvious, of course, would be when there's conflict, when styles clash. Different people are wired differently. They're coming at an interaction through their preferred style. They haven't learned to adapt. They haven't learned to understand the other. And so there's this escalating conflict when styles clash. And if you experience that within your team, there are all sorts of ways that we can address that. But it starts with defining why is the conflict there in the first place. And 99% of the time, it's because of misunderstanding of different communication styles. Another pattern that I see, this is harder to spot from the outside, but you'll be very aware of it from the inside, and that's that sort of passive aggressive withdrawal behavior that so often comes in when communication is challenged, and where somebody just holds to themselves what they have to offer, almost as a way of getting back at somebody who's coming across too strong. So those two are opposite sides of the same coin, the escalating conflict as well as the passive aggressive withdrawal. There are some other things that are important for us as leaders and managers to notice. When there's gossip within a team, or when there's quiet quitting within a team, that's always a sign of communication problems. It's always a sign of some kind of infection in the communication system. And it's important that we get treatment for that infection before it spreads and causes damage to the organization. If you're seeing missed deadlines, if you're seeing repeated errors, then that is always a symptom of a communication issue. Because when communication's flowing smoothly, when it's working well, then you can avoid those missed deadlines. You can avoid those mistakes that come up because you're avoiding the misunderstanding. And then when teams blame individuals for their failures rather than the system of what the way they're operating, then that's also a red flag in the communication space, because we're making somebody the scapegoat for our overall team failure to communicate. So those are patterns that I notice that you may identify with some of those as what's wrong with my team. My diagnosis will always be the same on one level, that communication is the foundational issue. And if there's goodwill, which I trust there is if you catch it soon enough, if there's goodwill, we can always resolve those issues because we simply train people how to see the different communication styles and adapt to them. If I don't address the problem, then the costs begin to increase. The cost in terms of declining morale, for example. If I'm not resolving communication issues, morale will always decline on the team, whether it's between two key individuals on the team or whether it's the whole team across the board. There's also going to be reduced productivity because productivity always comes as a result of effective communication, of communication that's free flowing, communication that's honest, communication that's accepting of one another's differences. You'll see increased turnover on the team Like I said, there's quiet quitting on the team. That then eventually leads to actual quitting. And so that increased turnover on a team is always an indication that there's communication areas that need to be addressed. And if you're having difficulty achieving your team's goals, if you're not reaching your targets each quarter, if you're not getting through with the challenges that you're facing, all of those areas are costs of not addressing the communication issue as early as possible and as broadly as possible, because teams gradually come to accept dysfunction as normal. And that's a great pity, because it drains the emotional energy in the team and right across the business. It slows down collaboration, but also the leadership loses credibility. Because if you can't lead your team out of some of those difficulties, if you can't lead your team through to a place of successful collaboration, of reaching goals, of being productive, of having the well done of achieving something together, then credibility erodes, and your credibility as a leader is really threatened if you can't address communication issues as well. One of the things that's so important to do, and this is what I love to zero in on when a business brings me in to help them address communication issues, is to look below the surface at the root causes of the issues. Because the surface symptoms are usually fairly obvious, even if we try to hide them. That's missed deadlines, it's disengagement, it's conflict within the team, those kinds of things. If we're honest, we can see those clearly. But the root cause below the surface is it's a combination of a lack of self-awareness and then a lack of training, or lack of ability, lack of practice in adapting to others who are different. Adaptive communication skills are really the magic wand, the secret sauce of turning these issues around. And so that is really where I wanted to land it for this week. If you can help your team learn to adapt to one another, then you're going to be able to say in probably even a few weeks, certainly within 3 months, you're going to be able to switch from saying what's wrong with my team to look how much my team has grown. Because when we fix those issues, the productivity returns, the collaboration returns, the sense of teamwork grows, and the leadership gains credibility, gains influence, because they've addressed the root cause and not just reactively playing whack-a-mole with the symptoms. So if that's resonated with you at all, I encourage you, reach out to me. Ask me to consult with you. We can have a free call, chat about what your issues are, to see if I could be helpful to you, or if I know someone else who could be helpful to you, to address some of these foundational communication issues that really is the answer to the question, what's wrong with my team? I hope you're going to find solutions if this has been applicable to you. I'd love to be part of that solution for you. Thanks for listening for this week. We'll be back next week with more insights on communication mastery. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. It would mean a lot to me if you'd rate and review the podcast so it helps more listeners to find us. But also, would you give me your feedback on things you'd like to hear about in future episodes? And remember to share the episode with a friend if you see something that would benefit them as well. You can reach me with feedback through my website at markburlinson.com. Just click on the contact button and send me a message. I respond to everyone personally, and I really want to hear from you. So thank you again for listening, sharing, reviewing, and giving me your feedback.